Let's explore attachment, meditation, controlling tendencies, and turmoil. Whoops, wrong button. Oh boy, coordination, where art thou? Alright, here we go. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. I have a tendency to get attached to things. The rest has been paraphrased. When angered or upset by a person or a circumstance, I persist in rumination for quite a lengthy period. What action can I take, in addition to my daily meditation, to prevent these attachments? We're going to begin with broad brushstrokes before even thinking about fine details. Beware of pseudo-spiritual nomenclature. Just as in pop psychology, there is a very dangerous tendency to pathologize the normal experience of human emotions, such as grief at the death of a lost loved one. Likewise, patriarchy tends to use scary-sounding words to ask its minions to do the impossible. Patriarchy ain't your friend. Patriarchy has its own agenda, and you aren't its beneficiary. Patriarchy is just one of many synonyms used to describe certain attributes. In ancient Buddhism, the Buddha was thought to have a wicked cousin named Devadatta, and whether this pair were real or archetypical, they acted as excellent archetypes. We are warned against being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, but especially rigid, fearful, and controlling. And we are advised to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind, but especially flexible, loving, and laid back. Patriarchy tends to tell people, hey, well, let's go over here. Patriarchy says, let's select our experience. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the version of Judge Dredd starring Sylvester Stallone, but there was this unfortunate cyborg who had a dial on either his forehead or his chest to control the intensity of the emotions he was feeling, and his father kept adjusting that dial to better manipulate him. He didn't care whether his son was happy or sad. He was just trying to use his son as a tool. Similarly, when we try to select our experience, calamity is going to ensue. Striving to select our experience, striving to select what we experience, the intensity of what we experience, and the duration of what we experience is the bread and butter of patriarchy. Simply surfing our experience, making peace with whatever comes up, is the path of the Buddha. Perhaps you are familiar with this aphorism. Perhaps you have read this on a t-shirt or on an inspirational poster. Whatever comes, let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. Whatever goes, let it go. What if rumination wasn't a bad thing? What if rumination actually served a purpose? Okay, so there is a way back in the early 70s, I think it was 1973, there is a notable biologist, and his name is challenging, so please bear with me. Theodosius Dobzhansky. I think this is what he looked like. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So I must ask you, or we must ask ourselves, what is the biological advantage of rumination? Simply this. Because our ancestors had the biological propensity to ruminate, to compulsively return to a failure or a problem over and over and over again, using a pure brute force method, they were able to develop strategies, some more effective than others, some less effective than others, but strategies were developed to deal with adversity. And that has probably had a very large effect in our survival as a species. Ask a biologist, they'll tell you there are stressors. Some of those stressors are circumstantial, some of those are physical, some of those are interpersonal, and some of those are mental. But we evolved the capacity to experience stress to help us survive. Those of us our ancestors who didn't experience stress did not live long enough to pass on their genetic traits. So if there is a misfortune in our lives, if someone did us wrong or there was a stressful circumstance, we have an evolutionary imperative to learn from it so that we can avoid it in the future, or the next time we involuntarily encounter something like it, we're able to deal with it more skillfully. This is not a question of pride. This is not a question of bad metaphysics. This is how we have evolved. And it has served us well. There's this myth that if we experience resentment or anger or pain or fear, that's somehow unspiritual. There's another myth that if we experience something like that more than once, it's a form of attachment, and we are not spiritually great individuals until we are liberated from the experience of that emotion or intention or thought or memory or imagining or confabulation. And then when we have a complete absence of those things, then we're enlightened, but I would disagree. I would say that enlightenment is simply the mastery of the Eightfold Path, and all that is as a child, I was befuddled by the specter of learning how to tie my shoes. But eventually, after great hours and time and effort and tears and repeat instructions, eventually I got so good at tying my shoes that by the time I entered the first grade, like most kids, I could tie my shoes spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. I had mastered tying my shoes. Similarly, we can master the Buddha's Eightfold Path. And depending upon how comfortable we are sitting, we can do it in like 16 weeks without leaving partner or home or job or pet or child, with still staying in our workaday world. And when that happens, we will still experience the full spectrum of perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. But they will not control us. They will not control our choices or our utterances or our deeds. We will be in the world, but not of the world. We will perceive things and emotions and intentions and thoughts and memories and imaginings, but not be their marionette. Oh, look at that. There, I guess I forgot to put it in. Well, let's keep scrolling over here. Okay. So, I guess what would be best? What would be best now would be to dive into the fine details, because these vague generalities will only get us so far. And I look forward to doing that with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you will not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. And now let us turn our attention to this morning's primary practice text, All Good's Easy Meditation. All good is described in Sanskrit as Samantabhadra, Samantabhadri Karma Mudra. All good could be described in Tibetan as Kuntu Zangpo, Kuntu Zangmo, Yabyum, and in English as the All Good One sporting in Tantric Union. If we have the misfortune of traversing the path of being rigid, fearful, and controlling, we will most likely view All Good Ones as entities to be worshipped and supplicated. However, if you found me on the internet, you probably are drawn to the path of being flexible and loving and laid back, and as such will only view All Good as merely an archetype, whose iconography reminds us that we are already wired to master, no less practice, bliss and letting go, as well as awareness and letting go, and love and letting go. Much like standing at the stove cooking a pancake, you and I are going to flip and flop between mantra meditation and silent meditation. So let's review the meaning of this 12-syllable mantra. Please chant with me. I invoke teachers, home action, or meditation, in whom view the Benza Tantric Guru teaches. Pema enlightenment and siddhi abilities may be mastered by all. I'm going to do a quick edit. Let's continue. So let's begin with the wild world of mantra meditation. What is the metaphoric philosopher's stone that transforms the worthless lead of mindless mantra recitation into the protective gold of mantra meditation? The answer is in two parts. Part one. During our inhalation, we could silently, mentally, and passively recite this italicized bit. Recite relaxing into this. What a deliciously cryptic sentence. What do we mean by this? This is the demonstrative pronoun that we use as a label to apply to whatever we notice. You see, my friends, every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, whether we feel it or not, whether we mean to or not, we are accessing the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic or the ribcage region of our spinal cord, despite the artistic liberties taken by the graphic designer. This sympathetic nervous system has not evolved to indulge either extreme of mind blanking or active concentration. What has it evolved to do? It has evolved to notice, and to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. What does this represent? What we notice. What we notice, what we perceive, emote, intend, reason, recall, or imagine. Whether that which we perceive is external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque. Now this begs a rather important question. What do we do with all this gurk that we can notice, including people and circumstances that make us feel turmoil? The answer is quite simple. During our exhalation, we physically relax as best we can while striving to chant this 12-syllable mantra 4 times per breath. Now, if this is your first time playing with this mantra or hanging out with me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. And now I'm going to introduce you to Bengali crease counting. Let's play with this for approximately, so during my in-breath, I'm going to keep track, during my out-breath, I'm going to keep track of how many times I recite this 12-syllable mantra, using the tip of my left thumb on my left little finger. Please practice with me. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Masiri Hung. 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 Now what do we do with the remaining 3 fingers? Glad you asked. We make our way now to the silent version of the same exercise. And oh yeah, by the way, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is ensconced within both our lower lumbar region of our spinal cord as well as the brain stem. There's a fancy name for the brain stem. It eludes me right now. Reticular activation system? Is that the right phrase? Let me go look that up real quick. I'm going to hit button 8. Let's see here. Okay, and is there a good Yeah, I guess the fancy term for that is reticular formation, but us kids, the cool kids, let's call it the brain stem. So let's just do that instead. So, anywho, this parasympathetic nervous system is wired for both physical relaxation and mental release, which is what we tasted of while chanting this mantra. Now we're going to take it a step further and practice it silently. During our inhalation, we can experience the perception of mindfulness as silently and mentally we recite the demonstrative pronoun this, and during our exhalation, we can experience the release of meditation as silently and mentally we recite the one-syllable verb ease, like Michael Jackson and Diana Ross, who reminded us in the 1970s musical The Wiz to ease on down the road. So, returning to our Bengali crease counting. Together, let's practice. So I'm advancing the tip of my left thumb during the inhalation. Now let us bring Lama Kieno. I'm not sure there's be an H in there. And let's hit a dictionary. It's very challenging because Tibetan language has its own alphabet, so we're not just translating, we're transliterating, which is a bit of a debacle. So we're going to bring Lama Kieno's practice of calling the teacher as from afar into Energy Work's path of bliss and letting go. And like many things in the spiritual world, it is best taken figuratively and not literally. Please chant with me. Let us invite real Imagine Guru. Let's try this again. Us are going to be Guru Padmasambhava and one of his many tantric partners. What's his most famous one? Lady Tsokya. So, this is most likely Padmasambhava and Tsokal sporting a tantric union, representing us. And real or imagined Guru Samantabhadra is represented up here. So, together, let us invite Gilo or imagined Guru Samantabhadra to the crown of our head. That in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. This simple act of snapping our fingers overhead and then resting the mind in silent meditation is a favorite Lama trick to deal with turmoil. Not to make it go away, but to help us to surf it. So we're going to take all of these syllables and squish them down into just 6 syllables, reciting 3 syllables as we breathe in and 3 syllables as we breathe out. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. And again, we rest in mindfulness and meditation. So let's get to the nitty-gritty that I promised you before. Oh, I guess we already explored it. Never mind. Let's continue practicing. Having climbed to contemplative cruising altitude, together as a team, let us meditate as transformatively as Rey Skywalker on Ajahn Class under the guidance of... I take it back. As Rey Skywalker on Ahch-To under the guidance of Luke Skywalker. Let us now perform the outer set of preliminary practices from a certain point of view. Let us courageously exercise the vulnerability to notice all being stressed. Let the seeds of empathy we may sow. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung Om Mahung Benzo Guru Mima Ziri Hung. Quick reminder, every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, our body experiences the impulse to generate a vertical traction between our tush and our head. Whoopsie, our head. In this system, we do not actively concentrate upon our breath, but we still notice it, and we treat it the way a piano student of yore would treat their metronome, reminding us to silently and mentally recite this as we notice our body breathing in, and reminding us to silently and mentally recite ease when we notice our body breathing out. As we breathe in and perceive, we do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. And we never feel quite as vulnerable as when we are naked. Perhaps that is why Kuntu Zangpo and Kuntu Zangmo are depicted nude. Instead of torturing ourselves with the fear of karma, may we view interdependence as the opportunity for our love to lighten the loads of others. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 The more we use our medial prefrontal cortex to actively concentrate, and the more we use our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to actively contemplate, the more our blood is going to collect at our amygdala, at the bottom of our limbic system. The amygdala functions as the seat of both anxiety and aggression. But something very cool happens. When we replace our active concentration with our passive mindfulness, and when we replace our active contemplation with our passive meditation, this blood shifts to our anterior cingulate gyrus, kind of like a catcher's mitt-like structure, just a few centimeters behind our forehead. And this bad boy functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, as the seat of empathy, compassion, and love. This is why the greatest Dzogchen lamas of Tibet have insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. It is also most likely why artists strive to depict Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri as beautiful. Rather than torment ourselves with the dread of death, may we recall that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 The sixth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, the seventh and the eighth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path are mindfulness and meditation. The sixth fold is effortless effort. Consider, if you will, this gal the color of a cumulus cloud. See how she actively sports in tantric union. This reminds us that contrivance is always trumped by spontaneity. Consider how her partner, the color of the azure sky, seems to be passively savoring the same tantric union. This reminds us that there are many flavors of spontaneity. And when it also reminds us that the scattered spontaneity that we taste of, perhaps when we have our third espresso over the span of 30 minutes, this scattered spontaneity will always be trumped by the centered spontaneity that is the fringe benefit of training in mindfulness and meditation. So much so that when our choices, utterances, and deeds flow from the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, that our life can be very much like the bliss of a real or imagined Buddha's paradise, or Pure Land, or Vati, if you prefer Sanskrit. Instead of neurotically straining to make the most of each precious meditation opportunity, we could simply flow from mindfulness and meditations. Generation of love-centered spontaneity. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Every time we exhale, every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel less graspable. Now, complex life on this planet evolved to think symbolically. So let's play with that right now. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast, empty void. Now, any English teacher worth their salt will remind us that a simile is only as effective as it is relatable. So what is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast, empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn? Which, although it could be tantalizing to the eye, is intangible to the hand. We now are going to let us now practice the inner set of preliminary practices, following the adapted instructions of Dzalpatrul Rinpoche. In our compassion, may we long to free all beings from the toxic tyranny of hating, raving, and clinging, metaphorically known as the three mental poisons. 'Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. "50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. The second fold of the Eightfold Path is love's right aspiration. Simply performing spiritual practice and then concluding it by wishing others well is the fulfillment of the Bodhisattva vow according to Karma Jigme Rinpoche. In our pragmatism, may all liberation of all others be fueled by our reliance on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students, described by the metaphor of the three wish-fulfilling jewels. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Interpersonal kindness, the third fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is kind communication, or interpersonal nonviolence. rather than squander all time and energy in defensiveness. How much wiser could it be to learn all mistakes lessons that effortlessly flow from the mindfulness and meditation-centered spontaneity? Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 According to Karma Jigme Rinpoche, the essence of the hundreds of Prati Moksha vows is simply non-violence. For the fourth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is kind conduct. A life squandered in competition and greed leads not to peace and fulfillment. Better to live in cooperation and generosity. Add lives and may this mind shoot out crowns. Purifying, transforming, increasing, and giving my stuff to all beings of nirvana and samsara. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 The fifth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is kind commerce. But what could that look like? Well, it means not being a Karen, forever trying to get people fired, and not being a Chad, trying to forever drive other businesses out of business. Instead, it means that forsaking cruelty and competition and embracing kindness and cooperation. Let us bring Guru Yoga, also known as Lama Naljor, into Energy Work's path of bliss and letting go. Let us invite real or imagined Lama Kuntu Sangpo to blend with our heart mind, that in the union of bliss and letting go we may train. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. 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 Let us view letting go through a philosophical lens as we breathe, as we bring the illusion of the horizontal duality of us and them into the dance of impermanence and interdependence known as Madhyamaka's yoga of inconceivability. Eventually, I'd like to put a logo here, the cover of the album for Dark Side of the Moon. I feel that would be so appropriate, but not today. Okay, so un momento, if you please. Let's go over here and hit insert. And pictures, and Buddhist yoga, and scrolling down to training, and scrolling down to Padmasambhava, and looking for rainbow body, and putting insert. Now it's going to be too big, so I'm going to hit wrap text behind text. I'm going to scroll up. All right, so what we see here is a depiction of Padmasambhava manifesting the rainbow body. This is not to be seen as literal, but figurative. Rather than indulge or controlling tendencies with our bodies of visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these wise words in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. Control G59. Okay. That's an error, guys, and I apologize for that. All circumstances or laws could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form. Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung 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 Om Mahung Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. All bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent. Insert. Aha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's hit copy, and here we go. And paste. All bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communicational speech. Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Benzo Guru Me Maziri Hung. All interpersonal speech could be as impermanent and interdependent as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this mind. Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung. Welcome to this morning's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist chanting, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, please type your question in great detail in the chat window. All minds could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although tantalizing to the eye could be not graspable to the hand. Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung Om Mahum Ben Soguru Me Maziri Hung. Jared, you asked an excellent question. First of all, what's nirvana? Nirvana is nothing more than simply the mastery of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. As a wee child, I found that the specter of tying my own shoes to be daunting. However, after a significant period of time and effort and tears, I eventually learned how to tie my shoes. And by the time I got to the first grade, I could tie my shoes spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. The same could be said of any skill. Any skill that can be practiced can be mastered, given the right effort and opportunity and time and instruction. So, upon the path of patriarchy, we are very rigid and controlling. And getting our rank is very, very important. However, upon the Buddha's path of being flexible and laid back, rank is irrelevant. Labels are irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is the Eightfold Path. And here's the irony. Those who are continually obsessed with their level of accomplishment, that is their indictment. Those who clearly take pleasure and delight in mastering the Eightfold Path without worrying about their level of rank or mastery have most likely already mastered it. Mastering it doesn't mean you stop experiencing certain emotions or perceptions or intentions or thoughts or memories or imaginings. Remember the old saw. Whatever comes, we let it come. Whatever stays, we let it stay. Whatever goes, we let it go. That's enlightenment. So whatever emotion our body is capable of experiencing, we welcome. We endure. We say goodbye to it. We don't control the circumstance. We're just here to be flexible and loving and laid back. It's not our job to control reality. It's our job to surf reality. Like a great spiritual Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Oh, dude, that's my skull. Let us bring the experience of the four bases of mindfulness into the conventional path of love and letting go, where it is love that is emphasized. Rather than indulge or controlling tendencies with all bodies of visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these words of love in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. May all minds of all beings know be as peacefully wise as the mind of a real Lord. Imagine Buddha symbolize Vayatikle one syllable zero bija mantra. Well, that's kind of lame on my part, isn't it? I didn't push the right button in the right sequence. And don't I feel like a horse's ass? Let me see if I can remedy that. May all minds of all beings... Let's just go over here and pick up the pieces and move forward. On second thought, let's jump all the way to the end and seal this morning's practice by percussively chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-syllable bija. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void no be as loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual, yet void no be as healthy as a Yidam archetype depicted in Buddhist statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing, yet void no be as fortunate as a pure land of law depicted in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.